This is the I Read Comic Books podcast, and it is a very special minisode. I am Mike Rappin. This week, I am joined by Kate Scotchless. Kate, how you doing?
Hello.
We are here today to talk about one of my favorite, absolute, wonderful X-Men characters in the world. That's a weird way to say that. We're talking about X23, a.k.a. Laura Kinney, a.k.a. Talon? Yeah, we're going to go into it. So, Kate, you and I sat down and we talked about this, like what we're going to read for this minisode, because we were going to do like an X-Men part 2, and I was like, no, let's do X23. Or maybe at some point I gave you a list of books to read for X23. And
I can explain this origin,
yeah,
Mike.
please, go for it.
Let me break this down, folks. Step 1, Kate sees Logan. It's the cutest, best thing ever, with stabby little potato Laura Kinney. Step 2, there's a sale running to go in tandem with this movie, and I'm like, I need more X23 in my life. Mike, what do I buy? And he tells me to buy all these volumes, and so I do. Step 3, Mike's like, we should talk about X-Men and a show. And I'm like, hey, I bought all these books you said to read. We should read them. And he's like, cool, you're really gonna love it. Step 4, I'm on vacation, having a good time, in a good mood. I break these bad boys open. I'm like, wow, there is so much child abuse and trauma in this book. Mike, you're killing me.
I mean, but like, you loved it, right?
It's so good. It's so good, but so depressing.
Oh my gosh, yes. Hey, so, Kate, you and I, we bought a bunch of books, or I own some, you own some, whatever, and we specifically read X23 The Complete Collection Volume 1, and then you continued reading on, because I'd already read this, of Volume 1 and Volume 2 of X23 by Marjorie Liu and a couple of different artists. So there's a lot to go into. I mean, the X23 The Complete Collection covers a ton of books. It's like almost 500 pages long. This is Innocence Lost by Craig Kyle and Chris Yost with art by Billy Tan. Target X by Craig Kyle and Chris Yost with art by Mike Choi. A one-off Captain Universe / X23 crossover called Double Threat.
So weird.
Which is so weird. X23, The Women of Marvel one-shot by Marjorie Liu and with art by Felipe Andrade and Nuno Alves with Jay Leaston on inks, and Nuno Alves with... there's so many people on that issue. And I'm sorry, I'm not crediting colorists on the previous stuff. I'm sorry. We're going to post a link that has all the creators. I just want to get to the titles here. And finally, there was 3 issues of Marjorie Liu's The Killing Dream, which is the first half of the first volume of X23, so we'll get into that. And then there's a single one-off issue called Judgment by Cy Spurrier and David LaFuente, and that's like a ghostwriter story. So this volume is very full of weird things, like the Target X stuff, I think, is a one-off or a couple of off issues of a new X-Men run. Like, this book is all over the place, but let's start with the abuse. I love when
Ghost Rider just shows up. I'm like, we're going to wrap up this volume by introducing this new character.
Yeah. I said, let's start with the abuse, and I feel bad for saying that. Now, the beginning of this book is pretty goddamn rough, and I mean that in a lot of ways. The story is rough. The art is rough. Everything that they do in the series is pretty rough, and then they retcon some of it later. So, Kate, I don't know, how are you feeling about X23 after reading just like the complete collection? Because I know you'd read some of the all-new Wolverine stuff, which is later, and I want to get to that. But just from the beginning of this volume, like, I think the first 2 stories give a good rounding of X23's origin, a.k.a. Laura Kinney. We found out about some stuff. And I guess full spoilers for this volume. There's a lot of X23 spoilers that are going to be happening today. So if you haven't read a bunch of X23, get into that and then come back. But yeah, Kate, let me let you actually answer my question. How are you feeling about this?
So, net overall, love the character. There were large facets of elements of these books that are quite dated at this point that I didn't love. And even it reminded me that comics have improved. And as much as we feel like day to day things aren't changing, holy crap, Marvel really published this, huh? One of the things that gets me there is like, you're introduced to X23 and she's a child. And I mean like 7, 8 years old. And we're seeing her being horrifically abused and all that stuff. But then they're also dressing her up to go out into the wild to kill people. And she is 10, 11 at this point, stated on page, right? So we know that she is a tween, and they're putting her in like bralettes and mini skirts. And I'm like, holy shit, what are you doing?
Yeah, it's a bit much.
Yeah.
It's a bit much.
Important question that kept hitting me for these first 2 volumes is, why does Laura look like Dr. Kinney?
Well, it's one of her... Wasn't it one of her eggs that they had to use?
I thought they were explaining that they just took the X chromosome from Wolverine and duplicated it so that she has 2 Wolverine X's.
Yeah, the science behind that is really poorly explained, because they're like, well, the Y chromosome just keeps failing, and so if we replace it with an X chromosome, it's not gonna fail. Okay, sure, I will roll with that. But yeah, how do you put that inside of a person to have the baby? Because later we see that they're growing X23s in test tubes. That is a fucking core thing with X23 in the years beyond this book.
Right,
is that
there's a bunch
people
of them.
They're trying to make more of her, and she keeps going and saying, I can't let you do that. I'm awful. You can't make more of me, because then that would be awful.
Or just adopting her sisters. It reminds me so much of Orphan Black, where it's like,
yeah.
I guess we're family.
Yeah. But yeah, so I mean, in these first 2 stories about her time at Department X or whatever it was, I don't remember if they gave it a name, but it's really interesting because she, as a character, feels really bland. Like, they don't give her any personality.
Right.
And I think that's intentional, because she's supposed to be abused and all this stuff, but she has this connection to her mother. And so the ultimate ending of this book, where she ends up killing her mom, is still, like, heart-wrenching to this day. It still haunts her as a character to this day.
Right.
This is the clutching of the pearls for Batman kind of story for her, where she will never, ever be able to let it go. And so that's why she spends all of her time destroying and killing everyone who tries to do a similar thing. You know, if she sees any kind of child abuse, any kind of things like that, her mainstay in life is to go and just, you're dead. I'm sorry. There's no, like, gray area for her. She's willing to just straight up murder folks.
You have to die.
Yeah. And I mean, that thing changes over time. What I found really interesting in this volume is the little one-off issue that we got, where she's hanging out with all of the X-Men characters. Because for a while, X23, she shows up at the Xavier Institute for Higher Learning, or whatever the fuck it's called, and she gets put on a team, like, because comics are basically anime in some ways, and so at one point Craig Kyle and Chris Yost were like, hey, we're gonna break up these groups of new X-Men that that are kids that are going to the school that Grant Morrison introduced, and some of them we created, like Dust and Mercury and stuff, and we're gonna put them all on teams. And so there's this team called the Hellions, and there's another team, I don't remember what they were called, they were led by Surge, and those are the characters that we found or we met in this volume. And they're like, oh, you're going to go hang out with your girlfriend, Julian. And Julian is, a.k.a. his name is Hellion. He doesn't have hands because he lost his hands during a fight against the giant Super Sentinel. There's so much, like, Kate, I can't explain how excited I was to just read those little issues, because it brought back so many fond memories of teenagers getting abused in comic books.
Oh my God, Mike.
No,
oh my God.
No, I kid. I really love those stories because there was a lot of personality in all of those characters, and you saw it even in the little issue. Mm-hmm. They were all drinking except for Dust, because she's Muslim, and she's like, well, I'm having a great time even though I'm not drinking. And I like you get just a little different reactions from each of the characters, like Slide is a piece of shit, and Julian is sad because he lost his hands, and X23 wants to love him, but he's like, just love me, and she's like, I can't, because I won't let myself get hurt again. And it's like, soap opera shit. It's so good, and you just got that from a couple of issues.
But Mike, they also are so bad. Like, we just get a real casual eating disorder joke in there and stuff like that, and just oh Jesus.
I mean, I'm just highlighting the stuff that I like.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely, like, some use of crazy girlfriend, and that I felt had, like, a heavier weight than was necessary. Scott Summers and Emma Frost. There's a moment where Scott Summers and Emma Frost, I took some wonderful screenshots from that issue. They're standing in their bedroom, and Scott doesn't have a shirt and he's laying in bed. And then, like, there's 3 panels that would normally be over someone's shoulder. Mm-hmm. Instead, they are across Emma Frost's chest. Mm-hmm. And it's just like her boobs take up a third of the panel.
Yes.
And
because
I was like,
that's what we want to see.
Right. I was like, what the fuck is going on? Yeah. Anyways, so and we're kind of jumping all over the place. I mean, I guess the story here is, we meet X23 as she's basically born out of a test tube, born out of a woman.
Yeah, she's born out
mother-
of Dr. Kinney, which is like this whole forced impregnation storyline that's a little rough.
It's a little rapey, and I was
it's
like not
very
okay
rapey.
with it. Yeah, I didn't. They I don't know. This book was published at a time where it was like, yeah, implied rape is definitely going to make someone look like the bad guy. That guy looked like the bad guy when he showed up on page. You didn't
Right?
have to do anything to make him seem worse. He was like, make him ruthless in any other way, and I would get the same picture. You didn't. I don't know.
Same.
There was a lot
he
of
didn't
shit
need
that
to
I
be
was
beating
just
his girlfriend. He didn't need to be doing that. We didn't need sexual abuse as a backstory for Dr. Kinney to get her character, but
yeah, like at all. We didn't
Yeah.
need that at all. She's a great character without that, and such a weird drive.
What I did really like was Dr. Kinney's narration of like the letter she's writing to Laura kind of goes across that whole first arc and is the narrating kind of pieces that tie everything together. I really like that as a writing device.
Yeah, I agree. I think her doing the quote-unquote narration that X23 or aka Laura is reading later breaks your goddamn heart.
Oh yeah,
like I
that's
said,
what gave it the emotional punch for me.
The ending of that story is great, but it doesn't mean that it's a perfect story by a long shot. And I
Right.
think that's the most unfortunate part about this is like when we've got this brand new character, tons of hype behind her because we're making a clone of Wolverine. This isn't the first time, but this one's going to stick. And then they go and they wrote it this way. And again, this was 10 years ago maybe. I don't remember.
2005, I think.
Yeah, so we're not in a great time for comics. We're not in the worst time for comics, but like you said, Kate, things have definitely progressed.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so the story, goes on. She's grown in a lab. She's treated like this object. They try to destroy her empathy, and then in the next arc, we get like flashbacks to this time, and then this new character, Chimera. I don't know how you say her name. Just gets introduced. They're like, yeah, she was there the whole time.
Right? That threw me
She
so
wasn't-
much. I was like, what? I thought that, I was reading this on Comixology's app, and I was like, did this download wrong? Because I was reading it offline, and I was like, they must have missed pages. I'm like, nope, that's just what it is. They're like,
They just forced it in and decided she needed a rival.
she needed a rival. This is her handler who's been here the whole time. It's so out of left field. And then she has this giant, it's like a turtleneck spandex suit. So we got to cover our neck, but then this huge boob window cutout and hip cutouts a la
Listen,
Kate
Kate,
Bishop.
That's for flexibility. Like,
That's
you can't
right.
move around.
Like,
Duh.
you gotta air that shit out.
Yeah, anyways. So we get introduced to this Chimera character who's kind of the threat in the
Very
arc.
one-dimensional.
Oh, yeah. She's just,
They
you can't
don't
kill
just
me.
introduce her and pretend she's been there the whole time. They're like, they introduce her, but not really. And then, to the point that I was like, what is her power exactly? I'm so
Yeah.
confused.
I forgot. I knew that this character existed because she shows up later, and I forgot what her power was, and they don't really tell you until 3 issues in.
Right? That's where I was like, what the fuck? Yeah.
Anyways, so just sorry, I just want to get through the high level, and then we could dig in on each of these.
Okay.
And so we follow this thing with Chimera, and it's kind of like she's got a rival out there, and you better watch out. Then there's this one-off issue where the universal power that powers Captain Universe, I don't even know who that is, really. I'm sorry, I'm a bad Marvel fan. I don't know who Captain Universe is. Imbues itself inside of X23. She goes and kills some dudes, and then that's only relevant because later in the series, that power shows up again to help her. But we'll get there. We'll get there.
Yeah.
Then we get to this one-off Women of Marvel issue. I don't even remember. What was that issue even about?
It was not memorable.
Yeah, exactly. We get this opening to Marjorie Liu's story. Where did the X-Men piece come in? Was that the Women of Marvel issue?
Man, Women of Marvel I remember exists because it's on this sheet that says Women of Marvel.
Yeah, okay.
But
Either way, so we get this bit of Wolverine and Hell thing and Marjorie Liu's thing. So at the time of The Killing Dream when that book came out, X23 by Marjorie Liu, that issue, that beginning of that is basically X23 knows there's something wrong with Wolverine and she can't put her finger on it. And it turns out, and we know this now, and we knew this kind of at the time, that Wolverine's soul went to hell and a demon was inhabiting his body. So anytime you saw Wolverine, it wasn't supposed to be him. And so X23 figures this out. And, was the Women of Marvel issue the one with the crazy pencils? I think it was, because the Women of Marvel issue introduces this, demon or something
Okay.
that wants to, take control over X23, and I don't know where it came from. And it's like, it's been here all along. It felt really fucking weird. And so that demon thing that she fights off and is like, I'm too powerful, because she has like a strong will, and she does, shows up in the Marjorie Liu run, where there's this demon of Wolverine that has captured the demon, I guess, that was inside of X23 from the Women of Marvel thing and put it in a cage. That's the only relevancy that it has there, and I can safely say that I did not read the Women of Marvel thing until I read this book, and it didn't matter to me, because that's really not important to the story. It's the Wolverine demon thing that's actually important. Anyway, so we get a little bit of the X23's soon-to-be adventure across the world, and she ends up meeting up with your boy Gambit, and they go and help each other, and it's amazing. There's some bits about Storm that I want to touch on in a second, but then finally there's this one-off issue with Simon Spurrier and David LaFuente. They did this thing with Ghost Rider, and I'm pretty sure that the Captain Universe thing shows up at some point, and she wants Ghost Rider to kill her by staring her down. It's a bizarre issue.
She's trying to figure out if she has a soul, and she's like, do you see my soul? When, it's very weird.
Again, lots of weird stuff, lots of really great stuff. But yeah, I guess that's a sum up of everything. I realize we're like 20 minutes in, but still, a lot of stuff happens in this volume. And then we haven't even touched on the rest of the Marjorie Liu stuff. So, I don't know. Kate, can you give us a quick overview of the X23 stuff that you read, and then we can maybe just poke and prod at all the different stories that we've read for this?
Sure. So I read that complete collection. I also read volumes 1 and 2 of the Marjorie Liu run. The first one has art by Will Conrad, and it's not progressive.
To say the least.
To say the very least. And then on volume 2, it's like a 180, and we get Sana Takada on art. And it is
Sana Takada, oh my goodness.
So pretty, but also weird, because it's like a very different style than you've seen X23 done in before. And so it was jarring, and so both of them were jarring to me, but in different ways. So in volume 1 of that run, we get Miss Sinister showing up, and she's like, I'm not a clone. I had DNA injected into me that's trying to make me a clone, and that's totally different. And you're like, wait,
right.
What?
Logic, yep.
And her outfit made me want to scream. I screenshot that and sent it to, you and Xander and Brian.
Yeah. It's a lot.
It's a lot. It is, instead of just a crop top, and we've had a lot of crop tops so far in X23 at this point. Instead of just a crop top, now we have the balloon boobs with, the crop top / bodice, thing with, the stitching up the center. Mm-hmm. And stiletto thigh highs and booty shorts. And I'm like, wow, booty shorts. And also a lot of hip hugger jeans at this point, where we're seeing a lot of hip bones and butt shadows.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm like, I remember hip hugger jeans, and this artist sure did, but this was 2012 at this point, 2010. Mm-hmm. Were they still in fashion then? Because that was high school for me.
Hell yeah, they were, Kate. Can you read this comic book?
I was like, someone get Kara or Tia on the line. I have a fashion question, because I'm pretty sure these weren't cool by that point. I'm not positive. Yeah, so it's very different, because then we get the Sana Takada art where she gives X23 these really big eyes, because that's just her art style. And so it makes her look much more innocent, just because that's how humans associate faces or whatever, with big eyes being childlike. And at that point, we've seen her so dressed, super, we got to make all our women sexy, and so dark, and being in this very dark place, that then we get these really big eyes, and it's very jarring in that you're just like, oh wow, is she still innocent and childlike? I think yes, actually.
Yeah,
but it's a very big 180 when you just, flip the page and it's a new artist like that, which I think is always true. I'm glad they didn't break mid-run. I much prefer it when they do between volumes like this, so I do appreciate that.
Yeah,
it's just that I literally was reading them in one sitting, and so it was a thing.
I get you.
In that volume, we get Jubilee and Wolverine show up, because Gambit's called in the cavalry, and they're like, we're all here to support you. And she's like, cool, Jubilee, you're a vampire now. You'll kill me, right? And we're like, whoa.
Yes. And this kind of gets to the central core of X23 at this time.
Yeah, she is profoundly depressed.
Yeah, it's an interesting character thing that I didn't really pick up on as being such a big deal, I guess, when I was reading this. Not that, like, being suicidal or anything like that is something that you shouldn't take seriously, but I thought at the time when I was reading all these books that it was like, oh yeah, they just kind of use this as a weird thing because it's not really touched on too much. But when you read all these stories in a go, it's like, holy shit, Laura wants to die and she hates herself.
She's been made to kill over and over and over. And
Yeah.
unlike so many characters that we get forced to kill like that, like, in addition to doing it as a child and being horribly abused that way, she also remembers so much of this. And then the catalyst and volume 2 here of Liu's run is that they've come across a kill list of people that she was sent to assassinate. And it's just one page of many, and she only has this one page, but it's so many names. And so she's like, oh, I'm a terrible person. And Jubilee and those guys are like, well, you were forced to do this, like, completely outside of your own control.
Right, with this trigger scent and stuff like that, which is a thing that gets introduced really early on and honestly haunts this character for years and years and years.
Right, because it got
bizarre.
out there.
Yeah. It's the thing that I took away from this, like, it's specifically, I think, that Women of Marvel issue, maybe that's what it was, where she meets up with the kids from NYX. And I know I originally was like, hey, you should read NYX. And I reread it recently, and I was like, maybe you shouldn't.
Was that the one-page summary that I read that it was like, so anyway, hand wavy, Laura got taken in by a pimp and was a prostitute for a while. You're like, whoa, what?
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. It's like, the thing that I liked about NYX was the characters that they created for that series, because they're really outside. They're like, if you like Runaways, you're going to like NYX in a weird way, in some ways, in that they're kind of outcast characters that are on the run because they're mutants, because it's at a time when mutants were like uber hated because House of M had happened, and they were some of the few people that had survived. Because during this series, House of M happens, or during this whole book, like House of M happens, so there's only like 198 mutants left. Laura is trying to help people at this recovery center for people that used to have mutant powers. Like, a lot of background things are happening that kind of alter the story. And X23, meeting up with these kids at NYX, where she had escaped the compound, and then eventually she was living on the streets, and she decided not to fight back against some pimp. And I hate that storyline. I fucking hate that storyline because it's so not that character, right?
Yeah,
like,
it doesn't make much sense.
It really doesn't make any sense. Exactly. The fact that she would go and work for someone is fucking bonkers. Yeah. So I really hate that, and I choose not to say that that's canon in my head, because it's like, it's such a different, in my opinion, wrong take on the character based on everything that was built to do that. They were trying to just be fucking edgy, and it's like, teen prostitutes are not cool. Like, fuck you, Joe Quesada. I'm sorry.
Anyway, that's just human trafficking, and
yeah,
we don't like that.
Exactly, and I feel like it's an easy way to do something super edgy, but at the end of the day, NYX wasn't even about that. It was about a damaged character. X23 coming into that series didn't have to be a prostitute to be a damaged character.
Well, and that's the thing that we've talked about this on the show before. A lot of the stuff that we objected to, it's not that we objected to the topic per se, it's that it's used as a cheap shortcut and is not actually the point. So, like, all of the rapist backstory, all of the like this stuff, it was unnecessary and not treated as seriously. And like you said before the show started, it's not necessary for X23 because Wolverine exists.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Like, Wolverine is a damaged character, and you didn't have to be raped or whatever to make that happen. Mm-hmm. And that, I don't know, it's so funny. There's all these lines you can draw between the two of them, and that's intentional. Mm-hmm. Like, if they fuck up X23, then it's because they just were lazy. Because if everything they want to do, they can do or have already done to Wolverine. So there's no reason they need to go beyond that for X23. Like, yes, there should be heartbreak. Yes, there should be all this stuff. The same stuff that every other major character deals with. But, like, to do things that are typically more traumatic and awful because they're things that are specifically done to women, like, that just means you're using her gender against her. It's not fair to the character. But I don't want to harp too much on this because there is a lot of good that came out of this book.
Yeah,
Kate.
well, and it's yes, I mean, I really liked a lot of it. And so and it's not even just that you're using gender-based violence. Well, then that's fine, but also then you need to actually address it and not just use it as a cheap backstory, which, okay, pedestal, stepping down from, we've definitely talked about this before. Let's go to what we loved, because holy crap, like you're saying, there was a lot to love. The more I read X23, the more I want to read X23 because I love her so much. She's so good. So
the bits that I really liked in this was the interrogation by Daredevil and Captain America of all people. I don't know why it was the two of them, but it made me so happy that it was them because those characters, one, I forgot that like I don't read a lot of Captain America and Daredevil, and I really love those characters a lot when I do read them. And so to have them intimidating and have them drawn in such a pretty way.
Daredevil's like, because I'm her lawyer. Like, wait, what?
There's so much of that to like really like just from an out of context perspective. Like it's so much fun, and I love the way that Mike Choi draws those characters. Like Mike Choi draws really weird characters sometimes. So a lot of people don't like his art. I do really like his art sometimes. I didn't like X23 dressing up in the corset for no fucking reason, but I did love the way that he drew Pretty Boy Captain America multiple times. Captain America was such a beautiful man. And I love that. I love her meeting her family. I think like that is such a core thing for her. I loved it so much.
Dr. Kinney's sister, right? So it's her aunt and cousin.
Yeah.
And they've like lied and like tried to brainwash her cousin into believing this kidnapping when she was a little kid didn't happen. And Laura's like, no, I was the one brought in to find you. That definitely happened. I killed that guy.
So in a previous volume, there was a moment where Laura Kinney or Dr. Kinney pulls some strings to have her niece rescued because her niece was kidnapped by some man. And X23 shows up and
sure, like instead of a bloodhound, we're just gonna bring in this 7-year-old from the lab.
And she straight up murders the dude, and so her cousin is taken back, and her parents denied it. They're like, "Oh no, you dreamed all of that," blah blah blah. And so when X23 shows up, there's a moment of like, "Oh shit, this is all real." And there's some really good moments between the two of them that I'm glad I forgot about them because they show up much later in All New Wolverine, and I'm like, shit, these characters are super important.
They were really good together.
So as someone who reads comics like this for a long time, if you're reading all of X23, there's a great payoff, I think, later.
Yeah.
I really did enjoy that. I really love Mike Choi's art. I know there were some moments that weren't so great. There's a moment of X23 standing in a basement holding her stomach, and it's just like all boobs.
Yeah.
Like, what? Why is that even necessary? He
definitely was like, she needs to be as scantily dressed and provocatively dressed as possible because she's a teenager and that's what teenagers do, right?
Yeah.
And like, my favorite is she shows up to school and they don't kick her out because schools don't have dress codes. Remember, kids.
Oh, yeah. I did like the bits between Wolverine and X23. I know, like, it's really cliche to have this, like, father-daughter thing, but I don't give a fuck because I love it so much.
And same with Gambit and X23 with these men who are so damaged themselves, seeing themselves in this damaged teenager and being like, I'm going to help you because I've been where you are and you can choose to turn your life around, and I know you don't relate to these other X-Men, so we're going to go off with you and help you find yourself and all that stuff. And I'm just like, oh my God, I'm so here for Dad Gambit and Dad Wolverine, the two best dads. Happy Father's Day, everyone.
Here's how I see it. It's like exactly. I see it as like Wolverine is like her father in a lot of ways, right? And he doesn't want her to repeat his sins, even though he fucking put her on the X-Force kill team. Like at the time, like there's the issues where they go to the school and the kids are like, oh, I can't believe Laura's on the X-Force team, and that's like the X-Men kill team. Like Cyclops at one point was like, we need somebody to go kill these purifiers because they are fucking up our Christmas and there's only so much that we can take. And so Wolverine puts together this stupendous kill team of Wolverine, Domino, X23, Vanisher, and oh shucks, I can't remember the other two. It's an awesome team. That book is beautiful. Clayton Crane does some amazing work. But yeah, X23, she gets put on this team, and it's like, after going this life of, I don't want to kill people anymore, or killing is really fucking me up, Wolverine was like, don't worry, kid, I'll watch out for you. Come kill with me.
Yeah,
it's like, okay, that's
totally
weird.
different.
And so when we get to, the Marjorie Liu stuff where she goes off and she's like, I need to fucking do my own shit, also get away from this demon Wolverine, that's like she left X-Force, she left all this stuff, and there's like some really solid character growth here. And you see it even more as the series goes on, like the Marjorie Liu stuff. Oh man, Kate, I fucking just remembered so much cool shit about this series, about like how X23 gets to become the woman that she is by all new Wolverine. And yeah, I really enjoyed a lot of that stuff. Like all the Wolverine X23 interactions are just fantastic, because it's like, I'm a bad dad, but I want to be a better dad. And she's like, I know, but we shouldn't hang out. And he's like, that's probably a good idea.
What did you think about, like, later we get when Wolverine and Jubilee show up to Gambit, and this is in volume 2 of Liu's run. So Wolverine and Jubilee show up, and this comes up when he's talking to Gambit, and Gambit's like, you fucking put her on X-Force, like, you're part of her trauma. And then he tries to explain himself a little more, where he's like, well, I did that because at that point, killing for someone was the only thing she knew, and she needed to get it out of her system, and blah, 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 blah.
Well, they do this thing with her as a character where she, like, has this bloodlust. I don't agree with it, and it's really inconsistent. And I think at the time, Laura was at the school, and she was getting a bit too violent during, like, during rehearsals, during training. And Wolverine was seeing this, and Storm was, I'm really worried about her and stuff. And I don't know. It's weird, because they were like, well, the justification is that she needs to go kill, but ultimately I think that really fucks her up even more.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's the failings of this shitty dad that she has.
Yeah, it felt very kind of backtracking, explaining, but also maybe worked, because, like you said, Wolverine's so fucked up himself. He's like, you just not need to kill people to get it out of your system, right? That's what I do. And you're like, well, that tracks.
I guess, but I think at the same time, the proper answer was, like, she needed to find a way to channel her rage or her bloodlust in a different way.
Right, but it does seem like solid Wolverine logic.
Yeah. To that, I absolutely agree. Yeah. But yeah, I guess, but so it sounds like you're gonna keep reading this X23 stuff.
So I have the rest of Volume 2 to read, and then Volume 3, and then the only other X23 I own is Nyx, which I'm gonna read, definitely, but...
Okay.
Yeah, I've been warned by you, so I know what I'm getting into. But then after that, I don't have more, so I think I want to wait for a sale, and then pick up the more of the all-new Wolverine that she was in, because I fell off the wagon, not because I didn't like it, but because of funding shortages for comic book hobby, which is the most tragic but also common reason for falling off series for me, I feel like, at this point.
Yeah. It's a good series. Tom Taylor wrote one of the best X23 stories I've ever read, hands down. So... And I think Mariko Tamaki, she picked up a volume later. She did a 12-issue stint that just ended recently. It was pretty okay. I think there was a lot of fun stuff in Mariko Tamaki's run, but not a lot of, like, development and good action. Whereas Tom Taylor knows how to tell a story that...
He's a good writer.
Develops, he's just a solid writer. He develops characters really, really well. Yep. He introduced us to Honey Badger, and I'm super happy about that. It was so gimmicky at the time.
It was
and then
good.
I realized, you know what? If you don't care, this is a lot of fun. And I was like, maybe I shouldn't care. And then I had the best time in the entire world.
Yeah, I think that was one of the things I was noticing, transitioning from reading the complete, the volume 1 complete kind of thing into Liu's run. And it's like, oh, she can write dialogue between characters really well while having them have different voices. Although there is one point where Wolverine's annoyed with Gambit, and he calls him Gumbo as a derogatory name. Yeah. And I'm just like, I'm sorry, what?
Yeah,
listen,
Wolverine
Gumbo.
would use a swear. Yeah. He would use a swear.
Yep. Yeah.
So, actually, speaking of writing, I do want to bring up something that I noticed, and I've always noticed this. When X23 is written, I don't know who at Marvel Editorial has dictated this, but Laura Kinney never uses contractions.
Right.
and she writes in a way that's very robotic. And I want to say that I love it so much because it's very like who her character is. Like if you read, especially when she's interacting with other X-Men, like a lot of these books are her on her own with a lot of like internal monologue and stuff. But when you see her talk to people, her dialogue is so obvious because she doesn't write in slang. She writes very formally, like robotically, like I said, and I don't know, for some reason it like really works for me. And so later when you're reading like All New X-Men and you're reading X23 by Mariko Tamaki, All New Wolverine, you kind of notice that she slips into more of a human voice, but like it took a really long time for her to get there. I think, I don't know, it's something that I really noticed in this volume, and I was like, oh shit, right, that's because that's how she talks in these earlier volumes.
Yeah. And
if you do ever take the risk and jump into New X-Men Academy X, which I found out very recently used to be well loved, now very well hated. It's when X23 shows up, she feels really awkward talking to the characters, and it's written in a way that makes you feel awkward for reading it, not just forced awkwardness.
Yeah,
like it's super well done.
Yeah,
I mean, I will say Marjorie Liu, and I think Craig Kyle and Chris Yost and all these folks, I think they capture it. Like whenever she says, "I don't want to do that," she says, "I do not want to do that."
Right.
Like. It's so cool. I don't know. It's just a little tiny thing. Here, my life right now has been watching Orphan Black, the show with Xander, which is clones, and then reading this, which is clones, and then at work, working on a project that involves overwriting the clonable class constantly and having variable name clone for all sorts of things. So, like, my life has been nonstop clones for a bit now. And the thing that I keep drawing a parallel to was between X23 and Helena from Orphan Black. And I'm not going to do spoilers because Orphan Black is amazing. And if you haven't watched it yet, I don't give you a time limit. I'm not that kind of person. Just watch it immediately. But anyway, Helena has a kind of stinted speech pattern as well from how she was interacted with as a child. And also is just like that kind of vengeance killer where she's just like, oh, this is bad, and I've never lived a life where you could trust bad people to get punished, so I'm going to do it. I'm going to take this into my own hands. And she's this very independent, prolific killer. Like X23 is like that. Like, when she sets her mind to killing someone, she fucking kills them. Right. It's basically no one stands against her. And I really like that. Yeah, bad guys are going to get got. That's the thing with X23. Yeah. Especially in these earlier volumes. I think it's
which
something that
she part of why that prostitute thing made no sense.
Exactly. Kate.
Yeah.
I totally agree. Yeah, and that's the thing. I like that in these earlier volumes how like black and white she is. Like either this is okay or I'm going to kill you. Yep. Like, that's where it sits. And over time, she learns about gray areas. She understands that sometimes it's not okay to kill. I mean, not to say that that's a thing that she immediately jumps to, but she does start to understand that same thing that Wolverine gets eventually after many, many years of being a straight-up killer, that she understands the compassion and understanding, and that, you know, someone has done something wrong, but they can attest for their... attest for their sins or whatever.
Atone.
Like they can be atone. Thank you. They can atone for their sins, and they can, you know, be forgiven, even at some very heinous level. Like obviously there are people that are just straight up evil in her life, and so I understand why she's like, they will die. But you know, just because someone, you know, murdered someone doesn't mean they can't necessarily be forgiven in some capacity. So it's interesting to see like the evolution of the character and coming back and reflecting on these old issues.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there's always more. I could go into the whole... So one thing I did want to bring up, a couple things really quick. If you do want to read like more X23 beyond this, I would recommend the New X-Men Academy X. Even though I just listened to a podcast where people just dragged it through the dirt, I still love it. I still have affection for it.
Is that the one where they're like the original team teenagers come into the future to...
No.
Okay.
I'm getting there. I'm getting there. So New X-Men Academy X is all about, like, it was written by Craig Kyle and Chris Yost, and it features like Surge and Dust and Hellion and Rockslide, and then eventually X23. And you meet some teenage characters that grow on in your heartstrings. And this is where Glob Thurman shows up, for instance, for anyone that's out there reading the Age of X-Man stuff that's happening. A Knoll and Armor kind of show up. It's all really good. That's really fun. And X23 also shows up in All New X-Men, which is the original 5 come back from the past into the future, and we get this very short-lived, and boy oh boy, I feel like the internet was set on fire when it happened, but it was like a small romance between Cyclops and X23, and all them angry nerds out on the internet could finally be like, good, Wolverine and Cyclops could get together and it's not gay.
Oh my god.
It felt like a fanboy's dream in some ways. I think it's a fun relationship. I much prefer the Hellion X23 relationship because there's a lot of like hot tempers and misunderstood emotions between the two of them because they met at a time where X23 was still like acclimating to not being a hired killer constantly, and she ends up falling for Hellion, and she doesn't understand this emotion of like liking a boy, and oh my god, it's perfect. And he's just like, I'm too cool for school, and then I lost my fucking hands. What the fuck? It's insane. Kate, I'm having too much fun over here.
Okay, but here's where I got confused with trying to move forward. I'm like, wait, I just read the Complete Collection Volume 1. Don't I want to read X23 The Complete Collection Volume 2 next? And that's not on Comixology. You can only get it in paperback. They don't appear to have a digital copy.
Oh, that's
like
weird.
You can't get a digital on Amazon either. And
weird.
Well, so then I was like, well, what am I missing? Do I need to buy this? Because it's cheap if you buy it used on Amazon. And I mean, like $15, which for an actual, like a complete collection, which is like, I don't know, I'm assuming it's a lot of pages. So I looked at what's in this, and here, I'm going to tell you. It collects X23 the 2010 run, issues 4 through 21. So I'm guessing that that's the Marjorie Liu run that we're reading those volumes of. Then you get Dakin. Is that how we pronounce this name?
I think it's Dakin.
Dakin. Dark Wolverine 8 and 9.
Yep, that's because they did a crossover, yeah.
And then material from Wolverine The Road to Hell 1.
Yep.
And All New Wolverine Saga 1.
Oh.
And I'm like, that would be a ride. And
that's all good. That's all really good shit.
Yeah. And so basically what is on Comixology is all of these volumes in the like separate volumes. So like I have the X23 run as volume 1, 2, and 3, which is on Comixology, and I'm assuming these other ones are on there as well.
They are. Yeah, they are.
Yeah, and so they just never put this collected edition on there, but you can go and read them in this order if you'd like.
Well, so the crossover issues with Dakin, I will say, they're a back and forth between X23 series.
Okay.
So I bet you if you read it in the collected edition, they would put them in the order that they were supposed to be read.
Yeah, which is always nice.
Yeah, that's always nice. Dakin, oh my god, we didn't even talk about him. He's an interesting character because he's, I don't know, magically somehow Wolverine's son that didn't die in Japan all those years ago or something like that. Or maybe, and I'm sure that someone's going to be on the internet and call me out on this, I think maybe he was actually like a son out of, like a kid that he had while he was traveling in Japan or something like that in like the 80s. I don't remember, because in my mind I was like, oh, it was the woman that he loved back in the day during World War II.
Yeah.
But then it's not. I don't know. So Dakin, cool ass fucking tattoos. He's such a bad, amazing villain. Like, he's so chaotic evil, but like you also love him because he's suave as shit. So his whole thing, and I only say that because he was the villain in Sina Grace's Iceman, and I loved it so much because Sina Grace was intentionally trying to feature like all these queer characters in his book, and Dakin is like canonically bi. Like it's fantastic. So he shows up in Iceman, and he's just like, hey Bobby, what's up? You want to like kick it? And Bobby's like, you're a bad guy, and he's like, I know, but we could kick it.
Listen, there's that many of us in this universe, Bobby.
Yeah, but then he ends up being the villain in a different way. But it's great. But Dakin is such a weird character because he's Wolverine's quote unquote son, and so he feels this rivalry with X23 because Wolverine definitely loves her more because they're both as bad. Like, if you take X23 and Dakin at face value as terms of like their quote unquote crimes,
right,
they both have a
was
huge
he
list.
Forced?
Let me get to it.
Okay.
So if you take their list of crimes at face value, they've both done really, really bad shit.
Yeah.
The key difference is X23 was forced into it and forgiven by Wolverine. Daken tried to atone, but said, yeah, I did this and it was my choice, and Wolverine couldn't forgive that.
Okay.
So Daken forever holds this grudge against Wolverine for being just this fucking awful dad, because we already knew Wolverine was a bad dad. But he holds it against him, and so he's like, I'm going to kill X23. I'm going to kill Wolverine. He's the villain in a bunch of different stories, and it's really good. I almost feel bad for him because there's a handful of moments where Daken is like really honest about how he just wants to be loved. And I'm like, oh my God, like break my fucking heart, why don't you? And yeah, I really love his character, but the crossover issues that they do are basically X23 versus Daken, because he's like, I need to kill you. That's just what I'm here to do today. It's awesome. So I hope you read those, is what I'm saying, Kate.
I'm gonna, and I will also say, because I have this page pulled up on Amazon to read this thing. Did you know that Marjorie Liu is an attorney?
I did not know that.
That also, I did not know. She's a attorney and novelist, and then also writes comics. And she's written a bunch of paranormal romance and urban fantasy series that have been bestsellers. So, like, who knew?
I feel like you found your new favorite artist, or creator, I should say.
Who knew? Yeah, but anyway, this volume has 4.5 out of 5 stars on Amazon with a lot of reviews. So I think you're not alone in loving it. And I'm going to have to find and read this tie-in stuff.
Yeah, it's real fun.
Tie-ins ruin my life, honestly. It's so frustrating to me. Like, I get why comics do it, but like trying to hunt down when you're like reading back stuff, which is most of my life at this point. I'm reading stuff that came out in the past, and now it's like, oh, I need to find these 2 issues for this to make sense or to get the full story of some other comic. I'm like, son of a bitch. And a lot of times, if you're just reading, you're like, oh, I grabbed volumes 1, 2, and 3, so I have all the stuff, right? Wrong. Like, ugh, comics, why you be like this?
No one knows. Yeah, well, I'm glad you're going to keep reading. I really want to hear what you think of the end of Liu's run on X23, because I remember it being very, very satisfying. But yeah, I guess we've been recording for almost an hour, so Kate, I think we're going to have to wrap this up and say, and maybe we'll revisit X23 again. Yeah, as always, to be continued, especially with the X-Men.
Always.
Well, if you're interested in following some stuff that Kate and I are talking about, you can follow me on let me start that again. Well, if you're interested in seeing more of my X-Men rants and all that stuff, I do post quite a bit on Twitter, so you can follow me at Mike Rappin, and you can follow the show at IRCB Podcast, where I basically retweet stuff that I post, but I also retweet things that other people post that I think are really cool or are related to comics and in general, manga and things like that. So make sure to go follow us on there and on Instagram. I've been trying to post regularly on Instagram, so please do that. Oh my
God, Mike's gonna be Insta famous. Get on this bandwagon while the getting's good. You could also find us at ircbpodcast.com, where we also have this fun pronunciation guide that I should consult more often for creator names. And there's merch, if you want merch. You can email the show with your comments, questions, jokes, and so on at ircb@destroythecybe.org. If you have read and loved or hated any X23 books, please write in to let me know, because I need to know what to buy at this point. This episode first aired on Patreon. Thank you for supporting us.
And yeah, we've been trying to post more and more stuff on Patreon, so please, if you haven't checked out all of our series, we really hope that you do. And if you're listening to this on Patreon, thank you for supporting us. Infinity Shred is the best. They have a new album that I believe just came out, so if you get a chance, go check that out. They do all of our music. They are fantastic. Xander is a cool guy that edits this show, and just a nice guy in general. Can't thank him enough for helping us out. And I want to say thank you to Kate, thank you to Xander, thank you to everyone out there listening to the show, thank you to the Patreon people out there who are supporting us. We appreciate it so much. And until next time, comics are good, and so are you.